standpoint, mostly because I have been teaching there the last 4 years. I've been a teacher in Cleveland the past 20 years, and hopefully you guys all know that there's a school at the detention center that Cleveland is in charge of, because the detention center is located within Cleveland proper. So I'm actually still employed by the Cleveland Metropolitan or Municipal, whatever you want to call it, school district, even though I teach at CCJDC. So I have a county badge to get in the building, but I have a CMSD badge for everything else. So the past 4 years, I've been advocating on behalf of the students there and around several different issues. I've had a lot of community groups in that have done listening projects with the kids. I've done listening sessions with staff, detention side and education side. And then, of course, I have a lot of listening sessions with the kids because they're in school with me. We're self-contained, so I have the kids for about 4 hours every day, same group. They don't rotate. And I service the students on House 3. So those are the oldest, and they're segregated by gender and age. So I have the students who are like 17 to 21. There's 3 pods on each house. So I have pod B, and then there are 2 other teachers for House 3 that have pods A and C. So just to kind of give you sort of a framework of how it's set up there. So at the school we have about 18 staff members, 16 are teachers, and then we have a secretary and a campus administrator. And then the principal is the alternative principal for like all the School of Ones and us. He's wonderful, very supportive, all about doing what's best for kids. He's great. So some of the issues I found when I started working there were around the students and the communication between their home schools and our school. So unfortunately, even though Cleveland, we all share the same data system, the guidance counselors at their home schools, because a great majority of our students are from Cleveland, the teachers were being told if the kids were with us, doing their work with us, to put F's on their report card. So I did a call to action a couple years ago with CEO Gordon, and he ended up hiring someone over the guidance counselors, and so slowly there's been this process of disseminating to the teachers what they should do, which is just leave it blank or put an I for incomplete. Because the kids obviously, you know, we work really hard to get them to engage in school again, and then they go back to their home school and they see straight F's on their report card. And you can imagine how that makes them feel.
For each of the subjects, you mean?
All the teachers were being told, right, to put like F's in if the kids weren't there. Yeah, I know. It was
and one of the things is too, when he uses on probation, if they get probation, when they go up before the judge, the first question is, what does their school record look like? When they get out, you know, what's your grades look like? What is this? And Corrigan is definitely, Corrigan and O'Malley are definitely the ones that want to know what their school records are like. So what does that look when they're coming out? You know, looking at a sentence or looking at something like that.
So they don't do that anymore now?
Well, some schools I still have a struggle, and because my principal, it would be illegal for my principal to go into the grading system and erase those F's. So we have to contact their home school and say, whoever these teachers are, whoever the principal is, whoever the guidance counselor is, they need to go in and erase these for the kid. And it also hits their GPA, which right now, because of the alternative pathways for graduation, if you have above a 2.5, that can be one of the exemptions, so that if you don't pass state tests, you can graduate as these alternative pathways. So it's even potentially like ruining their chance to graduate because their GPA might not meet the requirements, and so then we have to try to figure out some other alternative pathways so that they can graduate.
Can you do your presentation first, and do we have questions at the end?
Oh, sure.
Please.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Sorry.
I'm on a time frame, and
yeah,
I
right.
want to get everything.
Okay. So that was one of the calls to action. The other call to action was the kids had nothing to do all summer, and they were getting in a lot of trouble. And because they weren't in school, there's an influx in the population at the detention center. Because the kids, you know, don't have school to go to during the day, so they sometimes get in trouble. So we did a call to action last spring with GCC again, and Eric Gordon agreed to year-round school beginning next school year, so for the 18-19 school year, and he also allowed us to add 4 weeks to this school year for a few hours each day for an extended school year this year. So that was sort of another win, that something that we have been working towards. So the other issue that has been frustrating me since I started my first year was the adjudication of the youth to the adult county system. So we have a lot of kids that are bound over to the adult system, and sometimes it's mandatory because of state legislation. The judge's hands are tied regardless of the circumstances. If they commit a crime that involves, for example, like an armed robbery or anything with a gun, pretty much.
Murder.
Right, like of course, like the extremes. The judge has no choice but, because of these mandatory bind over or adjudication laws, to send the kid, to the adult county system. Well, there's no education access at the adult county facility. So these kids, when they're sent there, are stuck sitting there for months, sometimes a year, waiting for their trials to be resolved without any access to education at all. And so from my first year, I discovered that that is a violation of the civil rights of students with disabilities. Because under the Individuals and Disabilities and Education Act, students who have active IEPs, individual education plans, because they've been diagnosed with a disability, have a right to education services, until they're age 21 or until they graduate. And so these students that are sitting down at the county without access to education and have these active IEPs, it's a violation of their federal civil rights. And so I started trying to get attention to the matter, and nobody really seemed to care. Nobody was really listening to me. So that summer, I went to Washington, D.C. I dragged my youngest kid with me, and I went to Sherrod Brown's office. I went to our rep's office. Marsha Fudge didn't want to see me, even though the detention center is located there. But I saw my rep, Marcy Captor, because I live in Berea, and she was very receptive. I also went to Portman's office. So as a result of it, nothing really changed, but I did get the ear of the state deputy director for Sherrod Brown. So she came to my classroom and met with the boys the following August. And I filed that August as well a civil rights violation claim with the Department of Justice. And it was sent over to the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, but in large part, it was ignored for months. But luckily, Sherrod Brown's office followed up for me, which made them transfer it to the U.S. Department of Civil Rights. So with that office, they have been having a hard time figuring out who's liable as far as their jurisdiction with it. And so they've gone to, they went to the county first and said, these kids need to be educated. The county said, we don't have a school, so we're not violating their civil rights by not servicing them because we don't have a school to service them, so we're not violating their rights. So we're like, okay, so they went to Cleveland Municipal School District because the county facility is located within Cleveland, and because when they leave us, they're supposed to be followed, even though we withdraw them and hand them over to the state system, which is Buckeye. That's the generic state prison system. And so
the one that's if they're sent down, what we call down the river, what our kids call down
right.
71.
Right, yeah, so any of the state facilities, they are withdrawn to the generic Buckeye district. So Cleveland Municipal School District has said that we send letters to the county every time one of our kids with an active IEP goes to the county and tell the county we need access to them, and the county just ignores us, and the county's saying it's not us. So that's kind of where the civil rights case is right now. They're trying to figure out who they can nail, and they're having a hard time figuring out who to nail because everybody's pushing it off on somebody else. So I met with Prosecutor O'Malley a few weeks ago, and with State Board School member Merle Johnson, and explained to him we need access to these kids, and he, said he was unaware of any of it. He said Sheriff Pinckney was probably unaware of everything, and that if he knew, he would probably want us to have access to the kids to continue their education, and that is kind of where it's been left. So I included in your packets for you copies of the letters and emails and everything regarding the IDEA violations. So if anybody is interested in what the letters were, anything like that. And then I included also some handouts from after the incident in January that was all over the news at the detention center, because so many staff members, administrators have resigned or been demoted and pushed other places. We had a really hard time for 2 months getting the kids to come to school. So I was lucky if they would get to school once a week. So I was sitting there basically by myself all day, just waiting for kids to come to school. And because the managers didn't have anybody to hold them accountable to bring the kids to school, there was nobody for us to like complain to or report it to. So one of my partner teachers put together this handout about since the week of November 27th, students in House 3, Pod C have missed 72% of the time that they should have been in school. And the reason has been staffing, increased number of students, and or behavior issues. And the lack of attendance is also like obviously reflected in their progress. We went from having like 290 credits earned to only like 24 in that same amount of period of time. And then we also have issues around special education, and these are mostly from the Cleveland School District. So when a kid arrives, our contention is when a kid arrives to the detention center, they should be immediately evaluated for services if they are not already actively identified with services, because we have tons of kids who arrive to us who are on special education services from like kindergarten to 8th grade, and then they just drop out of school for a couple years, and so they return to us and we say we want them reevaluated and put back in services, because obviously just missing school is not a valid reason to deny them services. And the district is saying, and a lot of special education teachers around the district are saying their attendance, there's this 105-hour rule where if a kid during an initial identification process misses 105 hours of school, you can't put them in special education services. You can't like identify them as needing services because they've missed so much school that it's hard to tell if it's attendance or a true disability. But that is not like applicable in this situation. In this situation, these are kids who have been identified for years, and they miss school because they drop out, not because suddenly their disability disappeared because they've been gone 2 years. They still have a disability, and we want them or most likely still have a disability that probably has been exacerbated by them missing school. So we want them identified immediately when they return. And reevaluated to make sure that if they do still have a disability, that they're being properly serviced and that obviously their rights, education rights, are being protected. So I've contacted the state about it, and they're kind of blah, blah, blah. There's a guy here that they just put in charge of Nicholas Demetrio. They just put in charge of education in correctional facilities, and he's kind of like blah, 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 yeah. Whatever. And so that is, I think that's everything that I prepared. I didn't want to just read you this part here, but these are things that the staff and detention center have said that they think they need at the center, because I don't like pretend to represent every single voice there. It's mostly my experience and other educators, but when I gave a unscientific random survey to anybody that wanted it, this is the feedback that I got about the needs. And then of course I talk to the kids every day, and so I also included on the last page what the students say they want, and the detention center officers as well. So, right, I hope that was not too long.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh.